Welcome to the Project Exodus podcast series on OFM podcasts. Join us weekly as we explore critical topics on addiction and recovery through insightful discussions, heartfelt interviews, and practical Q&A sessions with members of the Project Exodus team and community. Project Exodus is dedicated to making expert recovery interventions accessible to all communities. Through this podcast series, our hope is that understanding and support for those on the path to recovery will be enhanced. Whether you're personally recovering, supporting someone else, or just curious, join us in building a community of awareness, compassion, and hope.
Welcome to our Project Exodus podcast series. Today we have Josh and Larischa joining us for today's session. They are both staff members here at Project Exodus, just doing an amazing job. And so they're going to be just sharing their recovery testimonies with us today. So I think let's just start off. Josh, do you just want to share a little bit of the background of the way your life was in addiction and everything like that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having us here today.
Sure.
I think that there is obviously a lot that we could talk about. So if there's any questions that you have along the way, let me know.
Sure.
But I think, so diving in for me, my addiction was to pornography, and then eventually it became sexual acting out. That was a period of about between 10 and 13 years. And I think, so I was obviously exposed to pornography at quite a young age, so around the 11-year mark. And things, there wasn't really a progression much progression until kind of I got access to smartphone kind of technology. Yeah. And that is the marker where I can look back and say, okay, this is where things started to escalate. Sure. On the outside, I was very studious, so I had a lot going for me in kind of my school environment and my church environment. There was this public and private persona, or these this division of the two worlds where, on the one hand, I was doing really well and things were looking good, and on the other hand, I was getting deeper and deeper into addiction, especially after I got access to a smartphone. So probably around grade 10 or so. And then things started to really escalate.
Sure. And what were some of the damages that you experienced from having that addiction in your life?
So I think a lot of the damages I couldn't really observe in the moment. But in hindsight, I think things like confidence. I think it knocked my confidence big time. Having this thing happening in the background, my ability to engage with the opposite sex in a healthy way was really, really damaged, and it got more and more damaged with time. I think the shame was very consuming. And so there was a lot of relational damage, not just in terms of friendships with the opposite sex, but in terms of your male friendships. So I think I'd probably sum up what you were referring to as the consequences or the damages, as I think mainly relational, but also that expands, right? So if I say that, okay, there was relationship cost, then there's also opportunity cost. And if there was a knock to my confidence, there's also an opportunity cost. What are the risks I would have taken in life if I had been more confident at a younger age? What would I have taken on? Who would I have engaged with? Sure. Where would I have gone? What would I have studied? All those things come into question. And so it's hard to give a clear, this is the damage, this is the cost. It's more like a network, at least in my perspective, that kind of spreads out from a single point.
That's awesome. Cool. I think we'll definitely continue that conversation just now. So Larisha, do you just want to add from your side, like that beginning stages of addiction and the consequences and all of that? Just want to unpack that a bit.
Good. So I think with myself, my addiction definitely started during my college years. I don't remember being that outgoing during my high school days, but entering college, it was, that small fish in a big pond. And it basically started just with, the girls going out, having a couple of drinks. And there was a notable progression in that, where it was now, not just once a week, it became like twice a week. And we had Wednesdays, which were little Saturdays. I then met someone whose social life was very, very much a party life, raves and clubs and dancing, and obviously with that your ecstasies and your MDMAs and those type of stimulants. I recall at a stage the relationship got quite abusive, and the more abusive it got, the more I would start drinking. So I would go from 2 liters of wine a day, which progressed to probably about a bottle of vodka in 2 days. Sure. Yes, then I went through a period after we had broken up where I was I thought I was doing quite well. And then probably about 6 years later, I was in another relationship again, and he passed away. And that is when my downhill slide took a very definite turn. About a week after the funeral, I tried out heroin for the first time. And within a matter of 3 weeks, I was completely hooked. It was something that allowed me to step out of who I am and what was going on around me, and give me the ability not to have any emotions. I didn't have to feel things. I didn't have to worry about what people were saying or what I was feeling. I didn't go through the grief process. I just barreled on like it just didn't even happen. I do recall that it got quite dodgy in terms of my work. I remember hitting a stage where I was visiting the dealer about 5 times a day. My day went about those scheduled times to go pick up. And obviously work started noticing. I must tell you, at this point, I thought I had it all under control. I was like, nobody knows what I'm doing. It's fine. It's tea time and lunchtime. I'm entitled to go out. And that lasted for about a year and a half. The money that I spent was something astronomical. And during that period, I had learned very well how to isolate. I didn't want anyone around me. I didn't want to go to the parties. I wanted to sit in my home, use and forget that the world outside existed. So my coming into recovery was actually started with the fact that I had no money. I couldn't go and buy from the dealer, and I started going through withdrawals. And the withdrawals eventually became so bad that in desperation, I actually phoned my mom and said to her, well, this is the story. If you don't send me money, I'm actually going to die here tonight. Sure. She didn't send me money.
Oh, wow.
She did, however, take me to see an absolutely wonderful doctor in Richards Bay who knew about the processes with substance abuse and rehabs and those type of things. And that's how I started in recovery.
Sure. Wow, that's amazing.
I can definitely relate to so just in terms of like you're referring to so in terms of substance use, like it was a way of like escaping for you. And
Yes.
I think in hindsight for me, I can also look back, especially during like schooling particularly, there were events that had caused a lot of pain, and I would use pornography as a way of escaping from all of that.
Yeah.
Sure.
And from like kind of, relational tension or emotions that I didn't know how to handle appropriately or healthily. And then after time, that just became the way that I lived. So I can definitely relate to that. And also like becoming more isolated over time
Sure.
as I used that as a coping mechanism.
Definitely.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Josh, how did you make that step to actually reach out and get into recovery?
Well, I mean, I knew, so within myself, I've pretty much always had this idea of like, okay, well, this is wrong. This is not the way that I want to be living. Yet I was doing it anyway. I was involved in church community, like I believe in Jesus Christ and always have. Yet I was living in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And I think so the way that I kind of came into recovery wasn't just this moment. It was I kept asking for help.
Yeah.
And there were kind of 3 or 4 different avenues that I explored over probably 6 years. And the people that I asked for help actually couldn't help. They didn't know how to send me in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so I kind of got nowhere for a long time, but I kept on asking. I kept on making myself vulnerable, which was hard to do. And then eventually someone put me in contact with some people from the recovery community who had a bit more of an idea of like what addiction was and what pornography addiction looked like and what the recovery journey looked like. And that's when that understanding was in place and I had contact with that understanding, that community, that's when things started to shift. And that was quite a tumultuous journey, but it was difficult, but things started to change at that point.
Yeah. And what were some of the hardest moments in that journey?
Sure.
I mean, Larisha, you can also answer. I'm going to give Josh a second to think there.
I can go. There are probably a few, but I think at there was a point where I was working as an engineer in construction, and I was involved in a romantic relationship that, I wasn't bringing a lot to the table in terms of healthy ability to relate, and so things became quite toxic, and I was still acting out, and I was still trying to reach out and like be vulnerable and be open, be transparent, and it eventually just came to a point where the mentor that I was engaging with at the time said, "Josh, you got to check yourself into rehab," and there was no fight left in me. Like at that point, there was no like, I'm going to do things my way. I had been trying for a long time, and something in me broke, and because I knew it would cost what I thought my like what the public perception was, and it's the point where the two worlds collided, where the public and private came together, and I had to see it like that, you know, and something in me broke because I knew he was right. I knew that's what I had to do. And it would cost, like, so I had to walk away from Korea. I had to walk away, like, my friends wouldn't know where I was. I had to tell some friends, look, I'm going to rehab. Those relationships changed over time. It's like, there's a whole bunch that came with that. But so that moment of realizing, sure, I need to, this is serious. I need to take the stand of going to rehab. And there were a few other things along the way, but that's probably one of the first that come to mind. Like there was relational stuff as well along the way, like walking away from relationships. Then after rehab, walking away from Korea, like a few things like that.
Wow. And Larisha, for you, what were some of the most difficult moments and challenges getting into recovery?
When you were talking, I was sitting thinking, the day I went into rehab, I remember my mom and dad driving me down and they did not say a word in the car, not a word. And I could feel that disappointment. How can this be their daughter?
Sure.
Also remembering that I'm quite a bit older in that sense. I'm not somebody who's coming out of school and or in the party years, they're 21s, 22s. So it was quite difficult to accept the fact that I was an addict. It wasn't something I actually cottoned onto until I'd been at rehab for probably about 6 months. I remember the first day there, I think that was one of my worst. It was a Sunday, so there was basically nobody around. And like I said, I was kind of dropped off in the driveway and went to my room, and I just lay there thinking, what on earth just happened?
Sure.
It's like there was that 20 years that I basically wasn't there for because, my mind wasn't right.
Yeah.
And there I was lying on this bed in the middle of nowhere thinking to myself, how did I get here? And it's difficult to accept, very difficult, in terms of also understanding the damage that I caused.
Yeah.
I know when I went into this whole process, I was like, this didn't affect anybody. It was me that was doing it. I didn't stay in my parents' house. I had my own place. And I really was naive enough to think that, what's everybody carrying on about?
Yeah.
Life was easy for you guys. It was me on my own, isolating. And to realize that I had destroyed the relationships that I had completely and utterly. And also the realization in those relationships that it was going to be a lot of work to get them back again. I think what Josh was saying was also very true for me in terms of I had to move away. I had to completely leave that person behind and start creating a new one, leaving friends and the place I stayed and kind of having to navigate this way into a new life.
Okay. And then the question is for you guys, has this journey been worth it? Has there been beautiful fruit at the end?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I think number one, I'm really people view addiction as this thing that rather live without, and I can understand that. I can understand that. I would never wish for someone to go through addiction. But at the same time, for me, my experience of going through addiction into recovery has made me who I am today. And I'm grateful for who I am today. And the growth that I've experienced, the things that I've learned about life and about people, about myself and the way that I work. And so I think in terms of fruit, that is so incredibly valuable and so incredibly underrated. On a practical level, I've been in recovery for just probably close on 4.5 years now. Way before, I couldn't keep it together for more than a week, and the restoration that I've experienced relationally and in community and my ability to find confidence in the way that I live is again something that is so it's not a tangible thing. It's not this measurable thing. I mean, what is measurable is like a ring on my finger and be able to step into marriage, for example, which has happened quite recently, and that is something that is amazing and also a fruit of the journey. So yes, it's worth it. It is 100% worth it. There's no question for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Josh and I, in terms of Project Exodus and being in the recovery space, we've kind of Josh came in just a little bit before me, and we kind of walked a lot of this together. I I'd like to say that there aren't some things that are left behind that I might want to have carried into my recovery, but realized very quickly that I couldn't do that. So for me, it was relatively easier to just do the whole clean slate, move towns, no more of the old friends, meet new people, come into a recovery space. I was terrible when I came in because I really did not want community. I didn't want people around me. I have a very large personal boundary. So it was difficult to come into a community where there is so much support and counsel and just accountability in that space. And now it's something I rely on every single day. I don't know how I'd walk my journey without it. And that's definitely one of the fruits. I think for the first time in 20 odd years, I have friends that I can actually say are genuine friends, who want me for me and not me for what I can do for them. And then the restoration, I mean, that's incredible. To be able to sit across the table with my mom and my dad and have a conversation that doesn't revolve around me creating all this chaos, and making them proud. I think that was my highlight, was my dad, after like 3 years saying to me, I'm really, really proud of you. And I think that was my defining moments in my recovery, was just to hear that from him after having disappointed him for so many years.
And I think with that, like, there's an outlook on life that has changed and shifted where, like, in addiction, it would have been very much, I'm stuck, I can't go anywhere. The focus is on the thing that I'm getting wrong the whole time. Whereas now there's this, life is not a complete blank slate because I'm an individual with identity and certain opportunities. But there are opportunities that are full of like hope and excitement and beauty, like all over the place.
Definitely.
And that is also a way of seeing that is different. It's not that those opportunities weren't there previously, but it's something internal that has shifted, and that is very exciting.
Definitely, yeah.
It's amazing.
It's amazing how it feels to be able to create this new identity for yourself. You don't have people walking around going, oh, she's an addict, And a lot of people would do that. They'd point and go, okay, well, she's an addict. But to know that I'm a recovering addict changes my perspective in terms of this journey completely. I'm not who I used to be. I have the opportunity to create me. And in that is lots of excitement and lots of hope as well.
Sure.
Loads and loads of hope. I think having gone to Josh's wedding and just seeing the people that he surrounded himself with, it's a beautiful, beautiful journey that he's walked up until now. And I know it's going to grow fundamentally over the next couple of years. And to see that gives me hope, that we can continue in this journey hopefully without stumbling back again and having those fruits to look forward to.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, you're both working in Project Exodus, you're both kind of in the front lines working with people. Like, what sort of fruit are you seeing in those around you because of your journey?
Actually, I'll go on this one. For me, one of the most beautiful moments is when somebody who's just come into recovery turns around and says, I've seen it, I'm getting it. I want to be where you are now. And it's not about, affirmation to us. It's about seeing people being saved and seeing people develop that same hope in their eyes as what we have. I remember when we went into lockdown, we were working at the lockdown camps in Durban City Centre. And just being able to walk in there every day and see the excitement on their faces that, here we're coming to them. We're not, sitting in a building and saying, okay, well, come if you feel like it. we pushed into that community, and that experience is something that will never leave me. It was incredible. I'm using that word a lot today.
It's a good word.
Yes, but like I said, being able to turn around and hold my hand out and say to somebody, take it, let's walk this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like we get to see people's lives turn around. Like we get to celebrate with people, you know, and it's a deep celebration because it often carries the weight of that period of time where there was struggle and pain and hurt and where things weren't going according to plan and things weren't progressing.
Yeah.
And then the shift comes, and sometimes the pain doesn't go away and the struggle doesn't go away, but the shift is there. And then with time, like there's just something that is so hard to put into words, but that you can see in someone's eyes that just makes it all worth it. And that is something that's like so special that we only get to see in a space like this.
Definitely.
Yeah, it makes it worth, even if it's just one.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. That's the end of the time for today.
Thank you.
I just think I want to add something, Josh, just like as you're sharing your story and the journey that you and I have walked with my addiction and the struggles that I had, how because you went through all those different steps, you were able to be a guide for me, you know. And I think that's the beautiful thing about our stories, is that we can be a guide for the next person.
Exactly.
And the next person. That's how we multiply, and that's how we expand recovery and expand life. So thank you for that, Josh.
It's a pleasure.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that is a wrap for today. If you need to know more about Project Exodus, if you have any more questions, just go onto our website, www.projectexodus.net. And please do share this episode with anyone who you think might benefit from this discussion. And join us next week for another episode.